Hello, researchers. How are you, viewers? We are continuing to look at literature review, and I'm still your course facilitator, Dr. Mark Kahwa from Faculty of Education here at Mountains of the Moon University. So we are continuing to look at literature review. In the last presentation, we were looking at how do you organize the literature, how do you structure your literature. And we looked at the three approaches. You can either organize your literature using the chronological approach, or you can use a thematic approach, or you can use the methodological approach. So we looked at those three approaches. So in this presentation, we are going to look at what literature should you review. Because we mentioned that as a researcher, you have a lot of information on the internet. You have a lot of information that you can review. And when you open the internet, you will find so many resources. But now in this presentation, we are going to look at specific academic resources that you can consult if you are going to review literature. And we begin with the first one. So you can review journal articles, and we say that these are good, especially for up-to-date information. And you remember we were looking at the primary literature, we looked at secondary literature, and also tertiary literature. So the journal articles fall within the primary literature. And these are up-to-date, current resources. They are frequently used in literature reviews because they offer a relatively concise, up-to-date format for research. And the good thing with the journal articles is that all journal articles are peer-reviewed. They go through what we call the peer review process. It means that these are credible, they are credible resources which any author can consult. So these are the journal articles. The second is what we call the books. So as a researcher, you can also consult the books. And remember that books tend to be less up-to-date, but there is always some good information that you can get in reference to the topic that you are investigating. So they are still likely to be useful for including in your literature review, as they offer a good starting point from which to find more detailed, up-to-date sources of information. So we're saying that although we say that the books may not be so up-to-date as compared to journal articles, as compared to conference proceedings, as compared to chapters in books, but they are very good because they will give you an overview. If, for example, you are investigating a certain aspect, then you will come to, have to be grounded into that area to understand it more, to conceptualize it more. And therefore, if you need now the most up-to-date, the most current information, then you can you can consult with the journal articles, the conference proceedings, chapters in books, and so on and so forth. So the second document you can review are the books. The third one is what we call the conference proceedings. Now, these can be useful in providing the latest research or research that has not been published. They are also helpful in providing information about people in different research areas, and so can be useful in tracking down other work by the same researchers. So with conference proceedings, we mean that you see, normally in academia, academic conferences are organized on different topics. and different authors will submit their abstracts. So if the abstracts are found authentic, they are found worthwhile, then the authors are invited to come and present their papers at a conference. So normally what happens, once all the different papers have been presented in a conference, they are peer reviewed. They go through what we call a peer review process. And all those that are found authentic, that are found credible, are published. They are put together and published. And that is what we call the conference proceedings. So we're saying the conference proceedings will help an author, first of all, to connect with the researchers who have the same specialty like you. And then you can be able also to improve your own research. So research proceedings, conference proceedings, are as a result of papers presented at a conference. These are the ones we call conference proceedings. So there are so many conference proceedings that you can find on the internet. So what you only have to do is to check for their authenticity. As we said, we gave the criteria for selecting the authentic sources. Hope you have not forgotten that criteria. So to check to know who was the author, if they are up to date, if they are current, if they cover the issues of coverage and so on and so forth. So those are the conference proceedings. So this is also one of the resources that an author can consult. Then we have government, or what we call the corporate reports. Now, many government departments and the corporations, commissions carry out research. Now, their published findings can provide useful source of information depending on the field of study. So most of these government reports or corporate reports or reports from NGOs, non-government organizations, can be a very good starting point. One thing you have to note is that some of them, of course, don't go through a peer review process, but they are normally authentic because they come from reputable organizations. So for example, they can be relied upon. The information contained in the corporate reports, contained in the government reports, can be reliable because it comes from authentic, recognized institutions. So we say this can be a very good starting point for a researcher, although we say that some of them are not published, but they provide useful information which can be a very good starting point for a researcher as you consult now more authentic published works online. So that's what we call the government or the corporate reports. So always as a researcher, don't forget this. And there are so many reports depending on the area you are in. If you are in agriculture, there are always reports from the Ministry of Agriculture. If you are in education, there are always reports from the Ministry of Education and Sports on different aspects, on curriculum aspects, on teaching and learning, on performance, on assessment. So depending on which area you are researching, these reports can always be a very good starting point. So for whatever research you are doing, always search for these corporate reports within your area of specialty. You can always find them depending on your area of research. So they are always very helpful, and they give you very good insights as you try to conceptualize research, as you try to understand more about the area that you are investigating. The fifth one that you can consult is what we call the newspapers. Now, since newspapers are generally intended for a general, not specialized audience, like of course they are different from these other published materials like the journal articles, the conference proceedings, the chapters in books and so forth. These ones are normally written for the general audience. Now, the information they provide will be of very limited use for the literature review. Newspapers are more helpful as providers of information about recent trends, about discoveries or changes, for example, announcing changes in government policy. So newspapers do not give unbiased opinions. So although we are saying that the newspapers are not authentic when it comes to documents or resources you can review, you might not really cite or you may not quote a newspaper, but we are saying that the newspaper is a good resource, first of all, for information. It can be a good source, for example, for somebody, for a researcher who is wondering about which idea they can write about. You may be a student at master's level, you may be a student at PhD level, or maybe at bachelor's level, and you are required, to find an area where on which you can write your dissertation, your thesis, or your research report. So we are saying that the newspapers can be a very good starting point for you, because normally they report on different community issues, they report on different community challenges. So that can be a very good starting point for you to get a research problem. But we are saying, away from getting the research problem, the newspapers can also be of much help when you are, for example, writing about, you are investigating a certain aspect. So you can continue, getting insights, getting updates from the newspapers. For example, during the COVID-19 period, a lot of information was published, was always published daily, I could say daily, in the different newspapers. For example, here in Uganda, in Monitor, in New Vision, in Red Pepper. So always information was being given. So if you are a researcher, you could use that information to kind of strengthen your research. So those are the newspapers. Then we have theses and dissertations. Now these can be useful sources of information. Now theses normally are for PhD students, and dissertations are for master's students, but depending on which country you are coming from. So we are saying that these are primary sources of literature, whereby the information that is analyzed is raw information, fresh information collected from the different respondents. Then it is analyzed, and then findings are arrived at. And we're saying these are authentic because somehow they also go through the review process, the internal review process. Any institution will have, for example, an internal supervisor, and then you also have an external supervisor. So the theses and dissertations, they always go through those review processes. So therefore they are authentic and they can be relied upon. So, however, these have disadvantages. They can be difficult to obtain since they are not published. So most of these are not published, but are generally only available from the libraries or on inter-library loan. So the student who carried out the research may not be an experienced researcher, and therefore you may not have to treat their findings with more caution than published research. Well, of course, we have dissertations and things that are published that are online, and that means those ones have gone now through additional checks, but now we're saying those that are not published, which you can obtain maybe from your local library or from the interlibrary loan arrangement, you have to treat them with caution, because some of them might be coming from junior researchers and so on and so forth. But they can also be very useful documents to review. So I think now we can take a short break, and when we come back, we shall pick on from here. Thank you so much. So